en sjans, spør alle hva jeg gjør da. Jeg hitter kløden som om hver dag.
But the reality is, all of us fail. No matter who we are, where we've been, or what we've experienced, we've all had issues and struggles and had to face this idea of failure. We failed at school. Maybe we failed at driving. Maybe we failed in marriages. Maybe we failed at family. Maybe we failed in business. Maybe we failed spiritually. When I look back over the 35 years of my life, I can identify several moments, several failures, several things that I had to address that were incredibly painful. As I look at those things, I failed my driving test for the first time when I was 16. You know, the driving maneuverability, I failed that part of it. And I'll never forget laying on my bed. Here's a 16-year-old kid laying on my bed. I failed. The disappointment, the anger, the pain, the frustration. We live in a culture fixated with success, but the reality is failure eventually visits all of us. So the challenge today, where I really want to point us to go today, is not for us to live at that place. Not to necessarily identify the failures, because we all have them, right? When I even say the word, we go to those places where we fail. We go to those moments where we've experienced that. We all know what that is. But what I want to challenge us to do is, what do we do when we fail? Because if we're going to shrug some of that off, if we're going to dump some of that baggage, we've got to know, how do we respond to this? Failure's coming our way. How do we respond? How do we handle it? Because the reality is, friends, when failure comes our way, the next time around, we're always just a little bit more hesitant, right? I mean, have an area that you really struggle with, whatever area that is, maybe it's marriage or family or business, wherever failures hit you recently, we're always a bit hesitant the next time. We're always looking around the corner. We're always just ready to flinch up. How do we respond? How do we handle it? You know, this week as I was thinking about this whole idea of failure, one of the questions that I was really wrestling with is, what is it that makes achievers fail? I mean, those people that just seem like everything they touch turns to gold. They decide they're going a particular direction. I mean, failure is nowhere near them. What is it about them that helps them get there? I began to think, well, maybe it's their family background, you know? Maybe it's wealth. Maybe it's opportunity. Maybe it's high morals. Maybe it's the absence of hardship. But as you look at each of those things, not family background, not wealth, not opportunity, not high morals, not the absence of hardship, in all of those situations, you can look at individuals who found success, but didn't have the right family background, didn't have wealth, didn't have opportunity, didn't have high morals, didn't have the absence of hardship. So it's not all of those things, but what is it that gets achievers where they're going? What is it that allows people to go from point A to point B faster than most? I think the difference is this, friends. This isn't the big idea, but I want us to really understand this as we look to dump this whole idea of failure. Not dumping, let me be clear, not dumping failures, because that's going to happen. But how are we going to deal with it and respond to it? Here's the big idea. The difference between average people and achieving people is their perception of and response to failure. How are we going to perceive it? And how are we going to respond to it? Here's a couple questions for you to wrestle with this morning. When failure comes your way, and it's going to, when failure comes your way, no matter where that is, how do you respond to it? How do you perceive it? Do you allow it to dominate your life? We simply have to forget it and move on. One of the most frequent questions that I get asked just over and over as people are wrestling with things and working through stuff is, how do I move on? You know, maybe it's unforgiveness. Maybe it's failure. It's a myriad of things. Maybe it's someone who's hurt them and they're, how do I move on from this? And to be honest, friends, when I answer that question, I often mumble and stumble my way through it, because you're talking into some just emotionally loaded situations and issues. I hope this doesn't sound too cold, because I don't mean it that way. But since I'm not talking to one person, because you always kind of want to protect that and cover it up a little bit and season it with something that'll make it taste just a little bit better. But the reality is this, friends, when we fail, at some point, we simply have to move on. Now, all of us have things in our lives, whether it be failure or pain or guilt or unforgiveness. We have things, that's kind of happened in the past. We can't change it. At some point, we have to move on. And I think that's exactly what Paul is talking about. He's saying, forgetting what is behind. It's almost impossible to move toward what is ahead, the hope, the future that's out there, a different road, a different path, a better way, if we can't let go of the past. And friends, I've spent and invested a lot of time and a lot of emotional energy over the last 12 or 13 years of my life living in the past. Frustrations, pain, anger, failure, strikeouts, missed ground balls, frustrations. I don't mean literally strikeouts, literally missed ground balls. I mean just mistakes, failures. And I allowed that to cause me to cower in the corner and shriek from the calling that God had on my life. And maybe you're here today and you're looking at your life, your situation, you're going, man, I've blown it here, or I've blown it there, or I've blown it here. Maybe it was with family or marriage or with some relationships. Maybe it was at work. Maybe it was spiritually. And you're going, man, I have just blown it. Step number one, friends, is you have to move on. You can't change the past. It's the past. Let it go. Okay? I hope it doesn't seem too cold, but the reality is at some point, we just have to move on and get back in the game. I love the story of Roy Riegels. 1929, Georgia Tech in California played in the Rose Bowl. Powerful story here. Roy Riegels for California picked up a fumble that for Georgia Tech, and for something happened, and he got twisted, and he was headed the wrong direction. Can you imagine being in the Rose Bowl, right? California, Georgia Tech, fumble. Here you are, headed toward a touchdown for your team. The only fact that remains is you're going the wrong way. Now the fans are going nuts. Roy, stop. No. He thought they were cheering for him. And finally, one of his buddies, one of the other cornerbacks, he was a defensive end, tackles him on the 5-yard line. Eventually led to a blocked punt and a touchdown, safety for Georgia Tech. It actually ended up being the margin of victory for the game. It happened toward the end of the first half. At halftime, you know how halftimes are in locker rooms, and the coach is going off, and Roy Riegels is cowered in the corner, saying to himself, there's no way I'm going back out on that field. There's no way I can do this. This coach goes up to him and he says, Roy, you are going back out there. You have to get back in the game. And that's what our parents try to teach us, right? When we fell off the bike, when we busted our knee, when we got hit by the pitch, it's get back on the horse, get back in the game. First step, we have to move on. Second thing that I share with you is this. Failure challenges us to strain toward what is ahead. Strain toward what is ahead. I wish I could tell us that failure is avoidable. It's not. But failure isn't the enemy either. It's not irreversible. Failure is not a stigma. Failure